Yeah, it's a quite a small article in the whole of the treaty in Lisbon. The treaty was to give more democracy towards the European Union, and that is an article that should a member state want to leave, then they can trigger Article 50. There is a process involved, because then part of Article 50 is negotiating between the member state who wants to leave with the rest of the European Union. And of course I think most people are familiar with this issue that the present government is saying that they're looking to trigger it in March, then have the negotiation, hence the reason why it could take up to 2 years to finally leave. No, not at all. I mean, it shows naivety really on behalf of some of the print media like the Daily Mail, trying to get a cheap soundbite, in my opinion, on this. In a democracy, you have three levels to it. The executive, which is the government, legislature, which in the UK is the Commons and the Lords, and the judiciary. Each three are important parts of any democracy. And certainly in areas of constitutional law and public law, the role of the judiciary is to act like a watchdog against the government in particular, and politicians, if you like, so they don't just make arbitrary decisions or decisions which could be deemed as unconstitutional. So it's a key role in any democracy that you have an independent judiciary like we do. And you look at most democracies, in fact you could argue that there's even greater independence of some judiciaries in other states than what we have here. But for me, it was certainly not unlawful, and that's a key part of any democracy. It's a key part of their role in the judiciary. Well, it isn't so much interfering in matters of government. There's that legal principle of rule of law. And under the rule of law, not only do we as citizens have to know what the bounds are that we can behave in, so does the state and all public bodies. It's knowing that they have got to act lawfully as well. They too must abide by statutes that are introduced, by powers that are given to public bodies. I mean, for example, you look at the various public bodies, the police have powers, you look at local authorities from planning and so on. It's so diverse. This issue of rule of law, they've got to act within the bounds of their powers. And at this level, we're looking at the government and making sure that the government are acting lawfully. Otherwise, if not, you've got basically a dictatorship, because that means a government can make any decision they want to that could be adverse to its citizens, and that's not a democracy. Well, the issue of referenda is, it isn't so much legally binding. The reason a state would go to the public for a referendum is to get what's the opinion of the public on this issue. And we've had very few in the UK, and they've always been on what I would term certainly serious issues. I mean, even the Scottish referendum, I know that was only in Scotland, but it was a serious issue. Scotland was looking to leave the Union of the UK. We've had very few. I mean, the one we had before that was the alternating voting system when the government was elected after 2010. Again, that's an important issue, because it can affect how future governments are elected. Certainly in Parliament we have the first past the post system. It's just major changes. So it's getting the feeling of what do the public feel. So you're not bound by a referendum, but really you look at it, and most MPs would and should really abide by the will of the people. But this was so close to call. It isn't as though it was a clear like a 60-40 majority for leave. We're talking within 2% difference, and that's a key issue, and I think it's an issue for some MPs to consider. Should this now, I'm anticipating that the Supreme Court follow the High Court, that sitting MPs who may be pro-Remain, but the majority of their constituency was Leave, are they going to represent their people and vote to leave? And this is an issue for them to address. Not really. I mean, it is one of those where they were claiming that for example, you look at the Leave campaign, they said 350 million goes to the EU. They forgot to do, that was the gross figure. They didn't give the net figure of the rebate that we've had since the 1980s. So it was a lot less, that figure. And they said it could go to the NHS. You could see how, perhaps lie could be a harsh term, misrepresent, maybe. it would be them saying this is what could happen, and I think that's where they'd stand on it. There's issues around Turkey joining the European Union, and of course one big issue in this campaign was over immigration, and there was the fear that if Turkey joins, then all these Turkish citizens will be arriving in the UK. Turkey joining the EU is a long way off, certainly post the coup. There are conditions to meet, and Turkey has not met them for some time. The UK is not the only member state that had concerns about Turkey joining the EU, so there's many others, and certainly for France, Belgium, Holland and Germany in particular. They have concerns that they haven't met the true conditions from which to join the European Union. And the immigration issue itself, I mean, it was 0.5% of people in the UK at the time actually came from Eastern Europe. People, I think, were misled. They were voting on other wider issues of immigration with immigrants coming from states outside Europe. I think they were confused over that. I'm not saying they were misled. They were certainly confused. But these are the things. Certainly, the parties like UKIP and Farage gave out. There was that campaign with the Syrian refugees, which some people thought was despicable to use. But that's a different matter. These are Syrian refugees. It's a separate issue. These are not Eastern Europeans coming in. So maybe some people felt, well, I was lied to or misled, but you could see if we wanted to go down a legal path, it would be very, very, very difficult to convict any politicians who came out with those sayings. It dates back to the absolute monarchies, and very few statutes were around then, and the monarchs, when they had the divine right of kings, they ruled, and what they said goes. Of course, over the years it's developed. It's like a common law principle, so it's still law, and they've been eroded over the years because statutes have taken over it. And once a statute's in, that takes over that. But we call them royal prerogatives. Perhaps the only true royal prerogative is at the moment, like the Queen did 12 months ago, allowing the outgoing government to go and then accept a new Prime Minister. But really they're prerogatives of the executive, I suppose, if we had to put it in another term. It's the government who make them. It really, I mean, technically you need the monarch to declare war, but really it's a cabinet decision. Normally they go to Parliament to get the support of Parliament. But there's other prerogative powers, so it's common law powers that do exist. And so the UK's constitution is not written. Say, for example, you go to the US or you go to Germany, you can actually go to a bookshop and pick up a copy of the constitution. Here, it's unwritten. And by unwritten, we mean it isn't defined as you'd expect it to. It's a combination of statutes, prerogatives, protocols, and that's what forms our constitution. It makes it perhaps more difficult to try and understand our constitution compared to others, where you can actually read the document. Here we haven't got our document. We have constitutional statutes. I mean, recent ones we've seen is the general elections now are every 5 years. It's going to be very difficult for Theresa May to call an election if she wanted to, which is, you know, prior to 2010. A Prime Minister could call election whenever they wanted to. If they wanted to snap one, they could. But now that the statute governs that. So that's one example of how it develops. This has always been, if you like, a sticking point, not just for the UK, but a lot of member states with the European Union. The European Union, and we say European Union because if we go back to the 1970s, when we joined, it was the Common Market, and then it was the European Economic Community, and now we say the European Union, because you look at the progress over those last 40 years, just over 40 years since the UK's been a member. We are EU citizens as well as UK citizens. That's got its own benefits. We have freedom of movement within, and so we as UK citizens can go and work in one of the member states, live there. We would have rights to vote in EU elections and local elections. We'd have access to their health service, their education. Obviously, you can see how that's developed. That wasn't there in the 1970s. And the EU has also expanded in other areas. I mean, my particular area of specialism is crime and security. So there's the Commission for Justice and Home Affairs. That didn't exist when we joined the 1970s. So what it is then, of course, EU law is supreme. What I mean by EU law is supreme, if there's an area that we have in this country, like a lot of employment law, comes from the EU. So our Supreme Court has to abide by the European Court of Justice. So yes, our Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, brackets, except in matters of EU law, it's the European Court of Justice. So sovereignty has been an issue, constantly eroded, and this is past the debate I think we saw in the referendum, that we have, if you like, bureaucrats in Brussels dictating to us here in the UK what we should and shouldn't do. But there have been great benefits to it. I mentioned employment, part-time workers' rights, environmental issues. These are the areas that they do legislate in. I like to, again, environmental issues. We all like clean beaches, we all like clean air, and then also safety of vehicles. A lot of it's about safety for EU citizens. But we want to rule ourselves. Well, we still do in effect, and even if we're in. Most of crime work is UK based. There's a lot of legislation. Over 80% of it has since we've been members, been, if you like, UK law, not EU law. But it is an issue: is how further down the path of federalism, if you like, because it's not a federal state. But if you're going to go down that path, then that will mean more and more sovereignty will be given over to Brussels. And I think that's been a key issue. I'm not saying the European Union is perfect. You might gather from some of my answers I was a Remain voter, but perhaps I was a typical UK Remain voter. I liked what the European Union was about. I thought the benefits to it wasn't perfect. It needs more accountability. I think if you're going to have the European Commissioner, like we have Juncker at the moment, that really should not be selected from the Parliament. I think we should have a vote on that. There's areas of what we call the democratic deficit has been an issue. The Treaty of Lisbon tried to address that. The Parliament has far more power now than ever did since 2009. And even the bodies like Europol, Eurojust, who are part of Justice and Home Affairs, they are now more accountable. They are answerable to Parliament. And there are standing committees that look into their work. So there is more democracy within the Parliament. And I was tongue-in-cheek, did say when the referendum was up that you can't vote for the head of the EU. You can't vote for anyone in the Commission. You can only vote for the Parliament. And I used to tongue-in-cheek say, it's the UK model. We don't vote for our head of state. We can't vote for the House of Lords. We only have the Commons. But that said, I understand where the concerns were. But of course there are other issues with coming out perhaps have been borne out now. And I think what was interesting with that decision was how the value of the pound started to increase again, because we are going through a period of uncertainty both in the financial sector, and this country's built on services in the financial sector. We're looking at uncertainty. Will some companies stay here? I mean, there was the good news about Nissan and Sunderland, but Nissan could have easily gone, well, we're off. Ford, Renault, there are different car makers here, they could all disappear. Even like Jaguar Land Rover, who's Indian owned at the moment, why should they stay here? Why not move over to the construction in Europe? These are just examples I'm giving, but this is what has to be addressed, and I think what this government has got to do. But what it's got to do now is wait for the Supreme Court ruling. It's a one or two paragraph at most bill. Have a debate about it. I think it's important. There could be issues where talk about a deal. What deal are you going to get? And if they do get a deal, perhaps have a referendum and bring it to the British people. Are you happy with this deal? That might be another way forward. That's what maybe this court ruling has done. But I think that's important. There's democracy in action, and that's what people are talking about. And when you see headlines like the Daily Mail, and then we can all fall for a soundbite. I think it's a good question, because it was quite sad, because the BBC website, we all pay for our BBC licence, so it's more than just Strictly Come Dancing on a Saturday. You look at the television and radio, but it's got a brilliant website. And during that referendum, it had an excellent feature on the issues, and it was put in lay terms. It wasn't complicated. I think what you have to do is try and be as independent as possible, and there are, if you like, what I would term more independent media outlets, and the likes of the BBC, Channel 4, Sky News. They will have analysis or maybe a a page on their website to go for issues like this, to read, and they will balance it. And of course the BBC is always known for balancing, as well as ITV. I mean, I'm not just saying the BBC, but it's such a large website. It was brilliant for it, but a lot of people didn't read. And I think what was quite sad was the 24th of June, people were Googling, what is the EU? That was a day too late. It should have been done 22nd, 23rd of June. And that shows you that people didn't know. Print media, it's a personal view with print media. You have owners of newspapers, and it's not just a modern day thing, this has always been there. And we do associate papers with certain political leanings. But the owners of the papers have an agenda. So they're going to spin the story the way they want it. Whereas you have a public broadcast association, they are duty bound to be as balanced as possible. And if you do listen to public broadcasters, be it radio or television, you will hear them, if you have one politician who has one view of the debate, then they will all either have someone giving the other view, or they will read what the other view is. So it's always balanced. And I think that's where we should go. So if we do, say for example, there is another referendum on this, and it is about whether we support the deal, then go to those sites and read them. They're not difficult, and that's where I go.